Hello, 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 and welcome to Comic Book Herald Live. Hey, everybody, I'm Dave Busing, founder and editor in chief of comicbookherald.com. Today's live stream, you are listening to our favorite indie comics of 2024. We're going to start it there. I've got a special guest on here I'll introduce in a moment to talk through our favorite indie books, really just our favorite comics of the year. But I feel like if I call it indie comics, that will get some attention, and also it will spare me the endless stream of what about Ultimate Spider-Man questions that inevitably will arise in a conversation like this. But guess what? Big news came out at New York Comic Con today. If you are here for all that chatter, I think when I am done talking faves here, we'll dig into that a little bit. If you're good, if you behave yourselves, if y'all can keep it together, be respectful of those around you, we could talk a little bit about the Marvel announcements, including a new Marvel Ultimate Universe book, the event that they got going on next year, which of course, Dave Stinney strikes again. Where's the camera? I got it right again. I can't miss. Years of comics obsession will do that to you. Here's an individual who knows all about that. It's Arpad. Okay. How's it going, Arpad?
Not bad. Thank you for having me on the show.
I am very glad to have you here. Arpad is a comics critic, writes for The Beat, aka Comics Beat. You can find covering some small press and comic scene works there, and also for Doom Rocket, as you were just telling me, for the past 10 years or so, now back as a Substack. Doom Rocket, definitely one of the cooler sites out there. Arpad, I wanted to have you on because every time over the past, I don't even know how long, I'm like, hey, I'm looking for some interesting picks, like who's got cool comic picks. You always come in with my favorite selections because it'll be like 7 to 8 things that I'm like, I haven't actually read that. And like, it's the lamest brag, but I won't stop bragging about it. I'm well read this year. Like I'm trying to keep up with the scene, trying to read as many comics as I can, because I'm having a great time. So Arpad, welcome to the show. I'm happy to have you here, and I'm happy to talk through our favorites of the year because I feel like you have a cool list to share here.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Question.
psyched.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm psyched. It definitely has been a really cool year for comics that are like very, like you said, like indie, but
Yeah.
also like easily accessible. You kind of gotta
Yeah.
find them, but at the same time, there are all these publishers that are making really cool inroads into like the direct market and like comic shops and stuff like that. So some of the stuff that has really grabbed my attention has been like I funded the Kickstarter or I mail ordered it from the publisher, but some of it's stuff that's like right there on the shelf at the comic shop. And I live in Boston and I've got really cool comic shops here, and so I'd like stumble across kind of amazing stuff a lot.
So that was
So
part
it's
of what
it's, it's
I
nice.
wanted to ask you is like, what's your process, or what are your most likely sources for finding cool new stuff? Because I feel like that question is really prevalent for a lot of folks these days. There's kind of been a collapse of sorts of, social, but then also just kind of like the comics blogosphere, what news, whatever you want to call it, right? It's like more fractured than ever. You hear creators talk about this a lot, just in terms of like marketing books, like it's hard to know where to go. I am curious, where do you turn and where do you find yourself looking to be like, hey, what's out there? Like, how do I keep up with these Kickstarters, all that stuff?
It a lot of it's word of mouth for me,
Yeah.
just because I've been following that kind of stuff for a while, and so I guess I'm in a position where the people who've done stuff in the past that interests me are talking about stuff that their peers are working on currently. And so I just have a lot of that stuff come
Yeah.
my way. Um, but then, like I said, another big part of it is that there are a lot of comic book shops in Boston to start with, and then each of those comic book shops has got different people kind of behind the scenes ordering for them. And so there's like maybe 2 or 3 shops where I know I can go in and just kind of browse the new arrivals, and I'm going to see stuff that appeals to me that I'm not expecting or anything like that. And that's something that I get a lot of like joy out of reading comics, is being surprised by stuff still.
Yeah.
So a lot of it's direct word of mouth, and then a lot of it is just like well curated stuff. I'm kind of bad about going to read stuff places because I write so much. I don't, spend a lot of my downtime digging through other websites that write about comics. But
Mm.
at the same time, I definitely have a bunch of people who are specific writers who I really, really like. And so if they're talking about something in the same way that like my friends are talking about something, then I'm definitely more curious to check it out and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah, I can see that.
Mm,
I'm envious of your well-curated local comic shops. Mine ever since I moved out of the city in Chicago, and I've been in the burbs here for a while,
mm,
and it's definitely there's no, small press curation or anything like that, like, definitely anything that I wanted on that side of things, I would be requesting of them to go out and get, and then at that point, I'm like, "Well, I already know about it." But what I do have that I've really been enjoying this year, especially that is similar, is just perusing my local libraries. Like they actually have amazing taste.
that's cool.
And yeah, like the librarians, the stuff that they order, I don't know if everybody's gonna like this here in the States, but like they just have, new comic shelves. And if I check that once every 2, 3 weeks, um, I have found so many cool books that were not on my radar. And again, I try to keep up with it. I use League of Comic Geeks to look at like what are the new graphic novels. Because this year I do a monthly list of my favorite like trades that came out either that month or very recently. And I'll just
Cool.
filter by graphic novels and hardcovers on
Mm,
League of Comic Geeks. And that's nice. That keeps me in the loop pretty effectively. But man, the local library like curation system, there's so much stuff, including the comic here we're going to talk about in a minute, The Gulf by Adam de Souza. This was just sitting on the shelf, and I was like, "Looks cool. I'm going to check it out." This is one of your faves, if not your. Now, you sent me a list? I asked, "Can you send me a list of 5 to 10?"
mhm.
Is yours ordered because you're obsessive about ranking things like
Yeah, yeah,
myself,
it
or are
is
you saying,
actually.
or okay, no, no, we're on the same page there. So we have a list of 10 faves
Mhm,
that each of us is looking at. Here's the spreadsheet. Now the CBH picks are here in column B. This I actually put together for patrons. So right now it's a list of 45
mm,
of my favorites. This I will cap this at 50 by year's end. So I'm leaving myself a little wiggle room, but it's going to get tough. And then Arpad, I've got your picks
mm,
right here. So let's go through them piece by piece. And basically what this is going to be is I want to recommend comics to folks. So screenshot this puppy right here. You should read everything on this list. But then I just want to talk about why we're excited about these, um, kind of what we look for, and you mentioned I think a great point right up front, which is like stuff that surprises you, and
mm.
that being a core element of what you're looking for in comics these days. So let's start with the golf because this is the only one we have shared in our top 10, even though I think we have a lot of respect for the other picks.
Yeah.
Uh, tell me what about the golf captured you and made it one of your favorites of the year so far?
It kind of two distinctly different things for me. The first being the emotional impact of the story. It's very quiet. It's very much a couple of people wandering around talking over stuff, but it pushes into like personal feelings, and it tries to get answers from stuff that normally we just sort of figure is too big to try and tackle personally.
Hmm.
And so a lot of what they talk about as far as feeling like out of place resonated with me. But also the style that it's done in really, really appealed to me. I really love when people can do a really kind of sketchy style that isn't formal and feels almost unfinished, but
Hmm.
still really has a lot of like character and captures the thing it's trying to depict. And so it's all this like drawings of the woods and the natural stuff on the island that they're on, but it's like it's so doodly and sketchy and unrefined that that kind of contradiction really appeals to me as well.
Sure, sure. No, I can see all that. I was this is definitely one of those, it's a coming of age teen journey, and that can often be very effective, but there are also a lot of those in the world
Yeah,
of
yeah,
comics, right? So it's not necessarily guaranteed just by tapping into this space. I mean, definitely it's, it's of a vein, I think, with one of a lot of people's favorite comics of last year, which was Roaming
yeah,
by um the Tamakis. And it's not at all the same landscape, right? That's New York City. This is like wilderness in Canada, and like they're trying to
mm,
make these teens are basically, it's like end of high school kind of thing. They're like trying to make their way to this commune where it's like maybe life can be different. Maybe there can be a place where we fit in. It reminded me a little bit like on the TV side of like Res Dogs, right? Where you just kind of have these teens that are like, I want something, I want a way out of this. Like there's got to, it's like they're
yeah,
seeking this utopia or this
yeah,
idea, right? And they're trying to get there. The Souza, like, yeah, I love the artwork here. I also like Ollie is such a good lead character. This young girl who's kind of leading the pack. She is so like fiery and explosive and compelling, and just fixated on, because like so many teens would be like, I'm gonna run away, and you make it, 2 steps, right? But
yeah,
it's like they're like they do it.
yeah, yeah.
It's
And she's flawed as
yeah,
well. She like is so fixated that she makes mistakes, and that's really nice to see and not be this sort of picture perfect situation. But that
mhm,
makes it all the more real to me. Um, yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting how it places in the world of comics too, because it's definitely something that's like a young audience or like younger readers YA kind of book. It's from a publisher like that. It's cheap and it's big because it's a YA book and a YA publisher and stuff like that. But there's all of this kind of overlap between what we think of as indie and stuff that's like happening in the YA world and stuff. So it's not out of place, but it's interesting to consider it an indie book. It's definitely an indie book. It feels like a little student film or something like that.
yeah,
But you found it at the library because it's like I can't tundra. So it's a some YA imprint that has got pretty good distribution and stuff like that. So
yeah, and I think
it's
YA gets used a lot, to describe a lot of different things,
hmm,
and it's like we know there's an explosion in comics, but there's this question about like, well, what does that actually mean?
yeah.
And it's a very large genre. I think there's YA that can be used to describe like books for all ages or for kids. I
Mhm.
think the Souza, like this would be appropriate for not a young audience, but teen for
Yeah,
sure.
teens for sure. Yeah.
But
Yeah,
it's also
the
yeah, good.
social stuff they're tackling, I think you gotta be like middle grade or teen to really understand just sort of the advanced alienated personal politics of these teenage kids and stuff like that. It would probably be really cool to read something as a teenager about another teenager who has feelings that are this kind of real and complex and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the classic everyone has to read in high school go to would be, The Catcher in the Rye
Mm,
feelings, right? But this is a modernized, I think, a different lens
yeah.
on similar questions and reasons that novel has appealed so substantially to so many people for such a long time. Yeah, it's a good one. No,
It's the
it's
kind of thing that like roaming is the perfect comparison and stuff, even though
yeah,
roaming's drawn in quarterly, I think.
sounds
So
right.
but they're from like an adult publisher and it's not a YA book, but it's got more in common with the Gulf than Dogman does. but Dogman is like, another YA book and stuff like that. So yeah, it's complicated. It's an editorial category with a lot of different like audiences.
Definitely. All right, let's talk about some other favorites this year. I'm just gonna at random go through whatever images I have. All right, this is my favorite of the year, Mary Tyler Moorehawk. This is a
Great.
book by Dave Baker, and I think it's through Top Shelf, which is an imprint of IDW. This book blew me away. I fell head over heels for it. It is part comics, part fictional magazine articles from the future about those comics. It is very much in that House of Leaves vein of like mystery and sort of like using the fictional reporting lens, looking back on this art that disappeared and kind of why did it happen. But then you actually have within the pages, the documented comics of Mary Tyler Moorehawk, making it even better. I think Grant Morrison fans will dig this, right? Just the meta aspect of it.
Oh yeah.
The author here, Dave Baker, is writing about an artist named Dave Baker who came up with this Mary Tyler Moorehawk, how it was this, sensational art in a time period. And the cool framing here is like, it's this story about art being created after like everything had been just corporatized and licensed out essentially, and like people had forgotten how to tell stories more or less. And this is this idea of someone coming back and being like, what even is a show, or what even is a story, and what can it look like? And it's like this great unheralded, behind the scenes look at this fictional account of how that would be done and the comics that came out of it. And it's like, it's like a cult classic documentary in some regards. It's just there's
Yeah.
so many layers and a density to this, um, that is really, really wonderful. And it's even if you're not as into, because Baker actually illustrates and writes this pulp serial adventure of Mary Tyler Moorehawk, right? And these comics. And definitely I had the feeling early where it was like, I don't know how much like this is fun. Like there's a real like artist like putting pen to paper and like handing it's almost like you're being handed the pages directly from their table. Like there's such a pure cartooning to
Yeah.
it. Like it's not processed. It's like this hasn't gone through editorial. They're just handing me the direct pages of this story. But it's also like it's this dense pulp sci-fi adventure kind of thing where it's like it's as if someone handed you issue 51 of 1967's Green Arrow or something, right? It's like
Yeah.
it's got that flavor. I love that stuff. I could see readers being like, I don't actually like this comic that much. And it's like it's kind of not the point, it's kind
Mm.
of the actual like and I enjoy what Baker's doing with it. But there's so much more surrounding it. So I'll throw it to you. You have read this one, it sounds
Oh
like.
yeah, I
Yeah.
thought this was great. I
Yeah.
really, again, that he was someone who also has an art style that is like Adam, where it is like it has that raw feeling to it, where it you can clearly see what they're depicting, but it's not beholden to like realism or anything like that. It's free to be
Yeah.
cartoony or sketchy or whatever suits the moment and stuff like that. And his eye for design comes through in the comics themselves in like the dynamic style of the art, as well as it being this sort of like, and here are the pages of the magazine and here are the pages of comic and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's got a lot of stuff in it, but I think it's about like how it's definitely about how important physical things are and physical media and art, and it's from this perspective in the future where like comic books, owning a comic book is banned because it's a thing, and there are all these details that are related to physical things and the story carries through all of those details in that House of Leaves kind of way,
Yeah.
where you're reading about the comic and then you're also at the same time reading about like the history of the ages of publishing and stuff like that, because
Mm.
the ideas from the comic bleed out into that direction. So yeah, I thought it was interesting. It's definitely going to be daunting for some people, but then I think other people who kind of love to read Wikipedia pages at length are really going to respond to this book and like it a lot. You know.
Yeah, and I think the thing that resonates with me about it probably the most
Mm.
is I just I love ambition like this in works. Like I love someone
Yeah,
because all of the things that we're mentioning, you put out all those ideas and it's a very intimidating prospect to be like, I'm going to package those together cohesively. I can see, and I haven't talked to Dave Baker about this, but I could see getting like 22 pages into this and you have all these ideas about and just being like, what am I doing?
yeah,
like what, how is this all gonna, and
yeah.
then
Where
you
does it
just,
stop?
yeah, exactly. It's like, because you can go on forever like that.
Mm,
And I love the swing. And and then it's just even more exciting when it connects. And it's doing things too, where it's like comics don't have to be any one thing,
mm,
and you take an individual who's been in the scene, who's been working on them, and they're kind of like, how far can I take this and make it my own thing? And for Dave Baker and Mary Tyler Moorehawk, it's like, I'm gonna make my comics, but I'm also gonna write these magazine articles in this fictional universe and have all of it intersect and connect. I just like, even if it didn't work, I would be admiring like what was attempted, you
yeah,
know? And that to me is like, it's not, I don't need that in every comic per se. Like
yeah, yeah,
I can absolutely have just a clean, fun, good time with some, good comics. But it's the stuff that I think is it lasts the longest to me. I think this one will hold up in my mind is like, oh yeah, that was an experience.
yeah. Yeah, I think you get a lot of stuff that is like callback and reference and stuff like that. And not to say that it's surface level, but the point of it is to be that reference and sort of evoke that thing. And I feel like the digging into the history is more in service of something in this story, and that's kind of refreshing. And that is something that will bring people back to it in the future, because it's always interesting to see how the whole medium is perceived of during kind of different times in the medium.
Yeah, no, totally. And it's like, and having a comic, because like, I mean, as much as comics have grown, it's still like if you have a book being like, references or of akin with like David Foster Wallace's Infinite Jest, like I'm immediately putting up some guards. I'm like, really? Like, it's like, because every book does this, right? It's like, if you like, Zelda and just names things that lots of people like.
Mhm.
And that's how you promote these things. But it's the rare book where I'm like, oh, I see that influence. The House of Leaves one gets really heavy-handed towards the end. If I was gonna go in depth on it, it might be like it's actually like almost a little too reminiscent of the ending of House of Leaves, I thought. But at the same time, I was having such a good time that I didn't I
Yeah,
couldn't be too bothered about that. But again, just it doesn't have to be like super high-minded literary ambition every time. The fact that it's there and it kind of pulls it off, like hell yeah, comics can do that. I
yeah.
love it when they pull that off.
Mm.
Let's go to another one of your favorites, and this one's on my list of my top 45. It's Putty Pigmillion. Or wait, no, this one's just on. Is this one not on yours? This one's just on mine.
Yeah.
Have you read this one?
This is another favorite of mine for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
The
Now,
process on this one is just crazy, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. So I actually like bigger picture. It seems like you have definitely like an affinity for Silver Sprocket,
Oh
and
yeah.
they're doing such cool like they're this independent, publisher that is doing these diverse, often queer stories, and just like the taste that they have and the curation and the ability to bring in these artists who are like same sort of thing where it's like you're just making comics in different ways. Like Putty Pigmillion goes into how this comic is made here by Lonnie Garcia in the back, and it's like one of the things they mention is they found like a doll's house on Facebook Marketplace, and like they
Yeah.
have like photo references of that as background. I'm like, that stuff
Yeah.
is so damn cool. And it's something that I never think about in terms of like, oh, that can be a part of
Yeah,
backgrounds in
that's
comics.
new.
Yeah.
Um,
But
uh,
the question I wanted to get to is like, does it feel to you like Silver Sprocket is having like a real kind of just like an incredible 2024, or is this kind of always their MO? Because I feel like there've been more of their works this year where I'm like, damn, like they're kind of on fire.
I would say for me, it's been the last like year or two
Yeah,
where there have been a bunch of books that have really blown me away. But at the same time, I don't know if there's anything by them that I've read and I've disliked. There's been a bunch of stuff that by them that's been solid, but not necessarily for me.
sure.
Which I think is a good sign for the scope of what the publisher does and stuff like that. And they were around for several years where I like really dug the aesthetic that they had of sort of like childish and mischievous and contemporarily relevant and stuff like that at the same time. But I just wasn't connecting with many of their comics. And then maybe 2 years ago at the most, just this wave started of people who are doing these books that are very much like science fiction and fantasy genre stories and stuff like that, but then they have connections into identity politics and or more for me also the like um just real experience and stuff like that, not doing it heavy-handedly, putting normal people into crazy situations, but definitely putting just like kind of screw ups into into a big mecha monster instead of like an island or something like that.
Yeah.
Um, so this is uh, also very formally interesting and does the same sort of like layered thing. Putty Pygmalion reminds me of animation, where you've got this kind of flat layer on top with the characters that are drawn in that very sketchbook, doodly kind of style. And then you have the backgrounds beneath, and those are the like edited photographs of
Hmm.
the dollhouse and stuff like that. And When to Pick a Pomegranate also touches on that kind of stuff, where there's this sort of like some of the comics are these characters who are floating on top of like colored textured backgrounds. Some of them are like cycle stories where it repeats over and over and over again, and as the cycle speeds up, you get more and more and tinier panels. Um, and then each sort of chapter in this story that's almost like the emotions in the stories reacting to each other rather than telling you like this happened, this is what happened to the pomegranate guy, and this is what happened to the lady, and then this is what
Yeah.
happened to the pomegranate guy. Each chapter, like the page colors are different, the art style isn't so different that they look like they're done by different artists, but Yasmeen Abedifard will make like one story be very like simple and heavy on textures instead of a lot of like line art work, and then another one will look very much like tarot cards instead of sketchbook and stuff like that. So it was this. I really enjoyed the sort of change in the feeling of the book from like chapter to chapter, and how it felt like all of these different books jammed together in a relatively like short read and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I was really both of those books from Silver Sprocket kind of took my breath away, and how experimental they were without without like being abstract in the story that they were telling.
Yeah. I think that's a thing for me that has started to click more. So Silver Sprocket is a publisher for those of you that don't know, and they're independent. They publish these, really, really creator driven and often experimental, sometimes abstract works. But I feel like where this past year I've been more and more receptive to books like Putty Pigmon, or here you're talking about When to Pick a Pomegranate, is like they're experimental and they're trying things, but there's an accessibility to the narrative that I don't dive in and feel like too confused or like caught off guard. Now, When to Pick a Pomegranate is definitely, I would say, the more abstract of the two.
Oh yeah,
Um and it's there's such an energy, kind of to what you're saying. There's such an energy from Abedifard here of like just like of wanting to try lots of different styles but with purpose. And it's, because if you're picking up your direct market comic, right? It's very rare. Sometimes it happens and it's very cool, right? But it's very rare that within the 22, 24 pages that like there's going to be like six different art styles. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
almost like an anthology, right? It's all kind of one
yeah,
thing through and through. And like each kind of subchapter here, not every single time, but it's just like we can go in different directions and try different things and means of conveying the story. Like sometimes it's like at first it's like almost cutesy, and then it's like, oh, this is really gross. And then
yeah.
there's moments where it's
Creepy.
like, wait, it's getting steamy. Like
Yeah, yeah,
what is happening? you
yeah,
know? It's an impressive work for sure. And Silver Sprockets, they're actually doing like a membership pledge drive right now. It's like fundraising so that
yeah.
they can stay independent. I would recommend, if you're interested in trying out books, that are outside of the mainstream, for sure. Um, they're one of the publishers that are, I think, having one of the best years. Like every time I pick one of their books, I mean, kind of like you were saying initially, it's like at a minimum here, I'm going to find something that is is using comics as a medium in ways that may surprise me and often will. And even if it isn't the story that resonates with me or doesn't speak to me, I'll probably come away and be like, well, they had a few tricks there that were really damn cool that I
Yeah.
enjoyed seeing.
A
You
lot
know,
of their stuff is really subversive, and they do a lot of kind of like horror and a lot of stuff that at least is like interesting. They getting the subscription to get everything that they put out is kind of cool. And I know earlier I said that every book that they put out isn't for me, but I appreciate getting to see this sort of like broad range of them. And I think that if you're curious about like all the different stuff that comics can do, then that sort of package where you're getting a whole bunch of different things instead of one thing that's different done a bunch of different ways. It's a little distinction, but it's a cool distinction and stuff like that.
yeah, yeah,
They've really made a lot of effort to integrate into the direct market as well. So you can go to like a comic book shop and find their stuff now, because they've really tried to be present in the Diamond catalog so that anywhere that's interested, or like libraries as well, sometimes to their detriment, have access to their books and stuff like that.
to their detriment, because then it puts them on the book ban
Yeah, yeah.
wavelength. Is that what you mean? Yeah.
I think it might have been like yeah, maybe like 2 or 3 years ago, but there was like a Fun Girl uh, free comic book day release that was maybe the first year Silver Sprocket was doing free comic book day stuff. And Fun Girl is done in that Silver Sprocket kind of muralist, simple style. But it's about like bad behavior people, something that's not appropriate for kids whatsoever.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
the grading system for free comic book day comics, with like the red bar for the explicit comics, the blue bar for the all ages, and the green bar for the young reader, was something new that they were working on. And so there's some stories in the news about libraries participating in free comic book day, and like young readers ending up with this comic that if you look at just the cover, you're like, oh, Fun Girl, and this
Mm.
girl's on a skateboard, and then inside it's like, oh, there's a dildo in the pancakes, and parents didn't take to that very much, and so
I can imagine. Yeah.
they're trying to become a part of the direct market for sure, but then there's some interesting sort of places where how they approach comics don't fit in with how people generally perceive the content of comics to be.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's definitely I mean, it's for more mature readers for sure. I have seen them available on Hoopla this year,
Yeah,
the library app as well, which
that's
has been
awesome.
very cool. Yeah, which is nice. Now we do have a question here from Caps here in the chat asking what the trim size of these books are. Do you have any? Do you pick them up physical or are you reading mostly digital?
No, I do physical copies. Sometimes I'll do digital stuff um, before it comes out and stuff like that, but mostly I
Yeah,
do physical. And so a lot of the Silver Sprocket stuff is kind of more like digest size, like not
bigger
as
than the Winter King.
maybe smaller a little bit.
Yeah.
I, I
Okay.
I've got Winter King here,
Okay.
and so when to pick a pomegranate is a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
And like you can see that they do things like spot gloss, and typically with Silver Sprockets releases, they'll do kind of cool. Rather than doing the hardcover, they'll do a soft cover that's got like cool effects on it, like a texture or like a shine
Hmm.
or something like that. Um, but all of this stuff is like here's a normal size comic book. So we're talking shorter, you know,
Yeah.
than a DC or a Marvel trade or something like that.
But it's
Um,
like a graphic novella, like lengthwise,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Usually we're talking like
that's
70, 80
pretty
pages.
standard for a lot of sort of like micro press, small press books is to be down in this size. That's what I was talking about with the Gulf, where this book this was $12.99, and like this is the size that it's printed in. It's
That's a
huge
steal.
compared
Yeah.
to like a trade and stuff like that. It's nice. Same with Frontier. This one's a little more expensive, but like this is magnetic press
Yeah. That's a
and
beast. Yeah.
gigantic, like truly huge. They've got like the spot gloss on the cover and the metallic and stuff like that, and full color pages that are really really nice. Where the printing process is kind of important to the publisher, and so in the micropress scene and small press and indie press publishers and stuff like that, even onto like Silver Sprocket, you get people who for their physical copies are interested in the properties of like the book and stuff like that. But at
Yeah.
the same time, you've got a lot of people who are doing comics who are also working as animators or working as illustrators and stuff like that. That the Frontier, Singelin is like a video game guy, and so he does background work for video games and character design for video games and stuff like that. And then in the comics, you've got like giant sprawling cities and landscapes and stuff like that that have the same amount of character as the individual like people in the stories that he's designed and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing kind of carries over into the book itself, where you've got an interest in having the book be designed well, or like some of these guys care about the ink colors that they pick out for their books and stuff like that. The Winter King, that's all Rizzo Press in Matt's studio and stuff like that.
See, that stuff is like that was so far off my radar, when I started getting into comics, right? And then you look at these indie small press publishers and it's like, yeah, just the thought into like, how do I make this look cool on the page? How do I give it texture? Um, and like the one thing that I find interesting about, you mentioned the Winter King and Matt Eamon's work is like there is kind of a uniqueness and like, it's like every copy is actually kind of different because like the print
Yeah,
comes out different and
yeah,
it's not something that, when you're used to obviously the kind of the DM direct market machine of everything.
Mm.
I mean, there can be difference in quality in terms of how much, let's say, a DC invests in like Black Label, and it's like, all right, we're using heavier paper stock.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's, I don't know if you're like, if you,
Magazine-sized books and stuff like that.
yeah, absolutely. And it's like
Artists.
I've had Marvel comic, like Free Comic Day, right? If you pick up the Marvel book, it
Mm.
is going to feel thin. You will note the cheapness of the
Yeah.
paper. And that's definitely something, as I think more and more about, like, if I'm gonna collect something physically, why?
Mm.
You know? Why do I actually wanna have it? And the people who are good at actual design and the way a thing feels, like, it, and this is a DM example, but, like, the Image comic side on, What's the Furthest Place from Here with Matt
Mm.
Rosenberg and Tyler Boss, like, those issues come out and they're, like, 40 to 50 pages. It's printed on nice, thick, solid, like material, and it just feels, when I hold it, I'm like, I'm happy. Like,
Yeah,
it feels sturdier, you
yeah.
know? Can I show you? So this is my favorite thing I picked up this year. So Beth Hetland wrote,
Mm.
Tender graphic, one of my favorite graphic novels this year from
Alright.
Fantagraphics, and I went to Chicago Zine Fest, and she was there, and this is the thing she sold with her collaborator, and it is a slice of pizza.
Yeah.
So it's a slice of pizza comic for $4.99, and the way it reads is like, you unfold it, and then you start either on the red or the blue side, and you keep folding your way through this pizza. And,
That's
like,
fun.
it's so arts and crafts, and just in a way that my head has never worked.
Yeah.
But reading it and just holding this thing, I was giggling like a child, like, just like I was having so much fun.
Mm.
And again, I that's something that, so I went to Chicago Zine Fest this year, like, almost by accident. And it's like, man, if you live near a big city and you've got Small Press Expo or something with comics, like,
Mice
I'm
here in
go ahead.
Boston. Mice no,
Yeah,
Mice is here in Boston, and it's great as
mice.
well. Yeah.
We have Cake here in Chicago, which I gotta
Yeah.
do next year now, because 'cause I'm like, there's so much stuff that is, like, just inventive, and
Yeah.
there's such a, like, a sincerity to someone who's like, "Yeah, we made a slice of pizza comic."
Yeah.
I adore
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Go ahead.
it's cool. Something it's funny, if you wanna actually tie it back to, like, um, stuff that most of us have experienced, they've been, pushing they being, like, both Matt and Aaron, I guess, because 'cause I've got him on my mind as well, because 'cause they're just doing a Kickstarter right now, for Daystar. Matt Emmons, who did Winter King, and Aaron Losty doing something together. And as like add-ons for their Kickstarter, they're offering both print and I think digital versions of stuff.
Mhm,
They've been
mhm.
moving to digitize more of their work so that it can be more widely available for people who are, unable to order print stuff mailed to them for whatever reason or whatever. And it's interesting to look at his work in the digital files versus in the print book, because the print book is the way that the colors came out are so like soft, and the texture of how it's printed is this sort of like visual noise in the colors that makes what would be flat colors have like a character that
Mm,
helps fill up negative space. Really gorgeous, and but his digital um, art is much more kind of like flushed out and saturated, and not heavy, but heavier colors and stuff like
sure.
that. Because
Yeah.
the printing process, the page is going to soak up a bunch of that ink, and it's going to soften it, and he knows that, so he's oversaturating his digital art so that the print art has that nice
Mm,
soft effect to it. And that's something that you saw from a lot of like inventive artists in Marvel in the 80s and 90s, because Marvel was like hemorrhaging money and trying things like plastic printing presses and pulp paper. And so you had artists like Barry Windsor Smith doing Weapon X himself, doing the writing, the art, the coloring, everything. He would oversaturate the colors so that they come out in the issues printed like looking like he wanted them to look.
mm.
But then a lot of the collections up until somewhat recently would have sort of his original colors, which were like very flat and bold and almost like garish and stuff like that.
Mm.
So yeah, so even in like the mainstream, you definitely have people who are thinking about the fact that it's going to get printed out and stuff like that. But more and more now, you have people who like that's part of their creative process from the go, and they're envisioning things with comics that are just like I don't know anything about multicolored printing process or anything like that, and so that's all just like amazing magic
Yeah.
stuff to me. The kind of like I don't know surprises that the comics have.
Yeah, it is. It does come up a lot when things get collected and recolored, especially right where it's like, well, that artist, Barry Smith, yeah, that's a great example. It's like, well, he was working under the mindset of like, well, these are going to be issues of Marvel Comics Presents, and like that's how they're distributed, and I have
Yeah,
to work accordingly, and not
yeah,
really, like, oh, this is maybe going to be reprinted in Marvel's new Compact Classics, probably in a
yeah.
year's time or whatever, right? Like that wasn't part of the
I think
calculus
that
there.
was like barely even a thing. Graphic novels weren't as like prevalent back in the early '90s and stuff
I was
like
gonna
that.
say we're only 3-4 years post Watchmen when that starts getting released, right?
Yeah.
So, it's even then, it's not nearly as top of mind as I'm
Mm.
sure it is now for folks. Yeah, this one so this one was on my radar because you recommended it. I'd read Eamon's Council of Frogs
Yeah.
previously, which is super fun.
Yeah.
And I'm back in the Kickstarter that just started yesterday. I think they already hit their goals and all
Yeah.
that stuff.
Probably. I think so.
But Eamon's ability to like tie in like fantasy and supernatural elements to just like
Oh my God. Yeah.
this love of nature essentially, and like this one, so the Winter King it's wordless, and it's basically just like a day in the life of a coyote, but that way undersells like everything that
Yeah,
happens.
a coyote who lives in like the woods in like Resident Evil or something like that. It's
Yeah,
crazy,
yeah.
but at the same time, it's very like peaceful and just sort of like planet Earth or something like that.
Yeah, right, but with ghost funeral marches.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
Pepto here asks in the comments, "How do you guys decide what zines to grab?" I can never tell. So that's a really good question. I mean, part of it for me is definitely like just the more I read and the deeper I get into comics, you start to accumulate some familiarity with individuals. So, like for example, when I was at the Zine Fest in Chicago, Kevin Huizenga was there, and I've read the Glenganji series, The River at Night. So I was like, this is an individual. I've read at least one thing of theirs that I love. So I'm kind of like, I kind of want to buy all your small press stuff because it's often very hard to get your hands on these things if you don't get them physically. Kind of like you were saying, Arpad, like with Silver Sprocket making a move into like the DM and publishing, or even like Matt Eamon stuff. It's like it's not digitized, so you can't get it through the the poorly the Amazonology or whatever's left of the digital market, but it's like you can't get it that way, and you can't get it at your local library. And if you don't have like a connect, like even through CBH, a lot of times, like Silver Rock, I can get like review copies and like press lists and that sort of thing. Um, but um, but yeah, so actually I think it's kind of funny because for me, it's like it's the surest way to get me to buy physical is to make it really scarce. And like if I have a sense that I'm maybe missing out on things, I
Mm.
will like buy it sight unseen. Like I'm just that
I've
desperate to like
I've
keep up.
grown I've grown braver about that.
Yeah.
For me, it was like the physical aspect of it was often that I could like page through it a little bit,
Hmm.
and for a long time, I don't know if this makes me curious or wishy-washy, but like for a long time, I wouldn't really go for stuff that was like wordless because I was worried about just sort of like burning through the story and it being over and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And so
Sure.
I looked for things that were indie but still kind of familiar to me, or where there was like some kind of hook somewhere where I could that got me. But in recent years, I've tried to pick up stuff that was like even less kind of narrative like than this. and just more like on the verge of being like art zine and illustrations and stuff like that, just because
Yeah.
I wanted to get some more stuff that was different from what I'd tried before. And it doesn't win every time. You take
Right.
chances on books, and some of them end up at the top of the list at the end of the year, and some of them end up at the bottom. Uh, so I think that for me, something that comics can do and have in them is often like little moments. Like they can be a scene or dialogue, but they can also just be like a single drawing, or like just like something in the background even, or something like that. There'll be some thing that speaks to me, um and like that, if I can get that moment to pop up, then I think that the rest of it is going to be solid. And that's
I like
not
that.
the case every time.
No.
Sometimes it's like, oh, there were fun background characters in that book, but it was meh. um but like, I used to be very fixated on like, oh, I want this to have like a good story, so that at the end I feel like I got a good story. And now I'm like, um can they do some kind of mood thing where like it gets me right there, and then I'll just sort of like trust the rest of the book to have other things that appeal to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that approach. It's very good. I definitely have that similar, like, I want this to be a full chunk of story.
Yeah,
And I'll start there. I think if you're at, this type of thing, or talking to a creator or whatever, I mean, what I'll do is, if I don't know them and I don't know their work, I'll go up and just ask, like, hey, what kind of stuff do you have? And a lot of them will be like, well, what do you like? And then it's like, I'm like, well, I don't know, sci-fi, supernatural stuff. I'm like, oh, cool. Because a lot of times, a lot of these creators, like, sometimes they'll be newer, they're up and coming. They're trying different things, so they might be like, all right, this one does this X, Y, and Z. And essentially and any con is what, because it doesn't have to just be like one of these small things, right? You can go to Chicago Con, and second at Best Press was there.
yeah,
Matt Emmons this past year, and it's like, you can find, and I basically, what I'll do is I'll set aside just like a budget and be like, all right, this is like my small press budget, and I'm just going to spend this. I'm just going to try this amount of things, you know,
yeah,
and take some shots in the dark. Like, here's one. It's called "Tell Me About Your First Girlfriend," and it's photos of like old NBA games, and then this story of like kind of like developing like queer longing from this queer artist that I just happened to bump into. I love basketball, so I was like, let me try this. This
yeah,
sounds inventive. This sounds strange. I haven't read it yet, but it's like, look at that. I mean, it's super small. I'm just like, I will take a shot on that thing. Is it going to be on my best of the year list? I have no idea, but like, I'm just going to have the experience of it. I've supported a small independent creator. Like, I'm happy with that.
yeah. Um, yeah, that you never know when that's gonna like come back up, because it's got so many specific and distinct um parts to it, that like, you could be looking at basketball cards at some point in the future and just be like, ah, that zine.
Yeah,
you know
sure.
um
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of and like in many circles it's justified, but there's a lot of fear in sort of spending a lot of money on something that's like tiny or weird, or
Totally. Yeah.
doesn't have a cohesive sort of like beginning, middle, and end, and whatnot.
Because often that's not what you're going to find. Like, the things that are like more fully developed are usually creators have been doing it for longer and have like the backing of something, whether it be a publisher or just sort of a career in the medium. A lot of times, like, the truly like up and coming stuff is like working it out, and it's
Yeah,
not always, but like a lot of times. And it is kind of just like, you take a shot on things, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and that's how it goes. Because not all comics are great,
yeah.
but some are.
But it's like, not to get too deeply philosophical or anything like that, but like it's the universal in the individual. You know, like you wouldn't think that something like that, because it is so specific and it's speaking to like such distinct little things, that it wouldn't be something that anyone could relate to,
Mm,
but it speaks to how everyone has those kind of things in their lives that are like their little things.
yeah.
And because it's so connected to life, you know, like I said, things will happen and suddenly you'll be thinking about that in the same way that, like, um, I don't have it happening for me in like superhero and indie comics as much anymore because they don't have really prolonged runs. But like some of the manga series that I follow and have been following for like a year or two, the thing that I get out of that isn't like at some point I am reminded of it and it like kicks off for me or something like that. In my outside life, it's more like returning to this place that I really love every
Mm,
time I go back to it. And
yeah.
so even if, like, you know, 4 books down the line or 6 books down the line or something like that, what's happening in it is like it's satisfying a very, very different reader thing for me than the pizza comic would or something like that.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And both are cool, but both are like, you know, cool for very different reasons.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it's the full breadth of what comics can do.
Yeah.
All right. Before I let you go, because we're right at about time, is there
Mm.
any of your favorites that you want to make sure we talk about and hype up?
I would say that that Frontier, I held it up for a moment.
Hmm.
That was really, really solid. Um, it's about just a couple of different people in a far future sci-fi setting who are united by the problem of space junk. There's so much crap floating around in the atmosphere that people, even though space travel is been invented and like over industrialized and stuff like that, all the waste from the industrialization has made it harder and harder for people to travel, and more accidents happen and stuff like that. And so you have these sort of like very disparate characters, a scientist and an ex-marine and someone who just like worked in a space station who really cares for animals, all united by this like problem that space junk is causing these terrible accidents and are trying to solve it. And so, in many ways, it's like very political, but it's very straightforward in its politics. It's not like telling a metaphorical story where you're like divining out how bad industrialization is. It's just a very like matter of fact set in like in a future where work really sucks, even though it's out on the moon and stuff like that. And it is
Well, you
gorgeous.
talk about the specific, being universal as well. Like I read it and I'm like, yes, I can feel these pressures in my marketing job by day. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah,
it resonates even though I'm not in space.
yeah, totally. It's the same problems that we have right now. It's just like they didn't get worse. They're just still persisting in the year like 3030 or whenever
Yeah.
it's set. And again, as like a video game design person, the art in this book is just absolutely incredible. Just really gorgeous colors and like incredible detail on like a Jeff Darrow
Yeah.
kind of level of like every single like socket and cog and dial and switch and stuff like that is right there on the person's backpack or whatever. but then they're
No,
shooting
no
at
panels are
this.
skipped
Yeah,
either.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
and it's like you probably could have taken a break and they absolutely do not. Now
yeah.
this one was kickstarted earlier in the year. It is available digitally now as well if you missed out on that, which was how I was able to catch up on it. And it's really good sci-fi. Been having a nice time with it. I'm not quite done yet, but I'm catching up.
I also really love The King's Warrior from
Yes.
Huahua,
Yeah.
Bold Gilhan Press, which is a local joint. They have been doing really incredible stuff. Now this is like something that taps into um, like manga and video game aesthetics that I like a lot,
Mhm.
but also centered in like a medieval Arthurian kind of um, like knights and demons kind of stuff going on as well. It's another story that's like a very straightforward sort of uh, uh, fulfill these tasks and your sibling will be set free kind of fairy tale. But it's cursed in a way that we don't think of fairy tales as being. And it has this one is one where like the politics are sort of bubbling right beneath the surface and stuff as well. But it's full of this like Hellboyish sort of mix of horror and heart and irony and humor and stuff like that. It just just um, really spoke to me without having anything in it that I could like super duper relate to. Uh,
Yeah.
you know, and
It's
just
it's
really
very, I saw it as, like, Berserk by way of Zelda,
yeah,
and in the most complimentary ways. Like, it really captures sort of the spirit of some of that horror, but then also just that sword and shield kind of fantasy
yeah,
accessibility,
yeah,
and, sometimes it's just cool to see someone, battle a lion steed and go on quests with them.
yeah,
Like, there's kind of there's, like, a purity in that, and it's but there's also, like, because it's small press and because there's this creator kind of exploding with ideas, like, every page is very unique. There's a lot of attempts at, like, different perspectives and angles on things
yeah,
that it's not just your, 6 cell block over and over again. Just a lot of cool swings, I think, visually, and, it's a very nice small press book for sure.
yeah. Yeah, earlier I said that like little moments will indicate that I'm going to have a good time with this book. And there's like a scene where the knight and the lion steed are up on a cliff and they're looking down at this bridge that they have to cross way off in the foreground. And there are all these like demons in the gap and stuff like that. And it's just like that moment right there was so striking that I knew that the rest of the comic was going to be filled with things that also kind of spoke to me.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's a great book. I enjoy this one a lot. It's definitely gonna be one of my faves. I think it's my favorite from Volgahan Press. Um,
Yeah, me too.
I've picked up a handful of their things, but it's the first one with me that I was like, "Oh, this is
Yeah,
this is one of my favorites."
I
We
like.
got a super chat here from Zaid Comics. It says, "Create coverage of indie books. I've been self-publishing for the past 6 years. Give our channel a peek. Crowdfunding right now for a book called Psycho Slumber. Good luck to you
Cool.
there, and thank you for the support."
Yeah, that's awesome. See, that's how you find out about this kind of stuff. It's like it really comes down to kind of word of mouth, and there are people in comics everywhere, from like creators to casual enthusiasts who want to put this stuff in your hands and want to talk about what they've read,
Yeah,
and it's just this like this it's a community thing for me, and like that's part of it. People
right.
people telling you about it is there's nothing like it.
Yeah,
Just
no, absolutely. Well, I joked the other day, somebody was like, "How do you find stuff?" And I was like, "Honestly, one of the best things I've done is I spent a decade plus of my life making Comic Book Herald, but now I met cool people with good taste who
Yeah,
sometimes recommend books to me.
yeah,
And
yeah.
it's just like a community of like people who if they say that something's cool, you're like, oh, I want to read that now, you know?
I think even before I knew people, I would like find a publisher that spoke to me and then just go crazy
Yeah.
investigating that. Even, you know, like Vertigo back a long time ago was something where it's like I didn't know anyone who did a Vertigo comic, but what Vertigo was presenting just straight blew my mind as
Yeah.
far as comics go and stuff like that. So you can definitely, yeah, I just I don't know. For me it just always boils down to this almost like person to person connection.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. No. Well, this has been fun. I'm gonna include the list of these picks here in the show notes for folks who want to check them out later. That's like one of my purest joys in life is just like, oh, here's a list of 20 things, and I haven't read 18 of them. That's like I'm in my happy place if I can go through that. So I'm gonna make that available to folks. Arpad, I really appreciate you being here. This was a fun conversation. I'm glad we got
Thank
to do
you.
this.
Yeah, me
Yeah.
too. Good
All right.
time. Thank you
Thanks
everybody
everybody
for
listening.
yeah, watching and stuff. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. And I will be back next week. I'm going to be interviewing Matt Wagner and Kelly Jones. We're going to talk about their ongoing Dracula graphic novels, one of which is being kickstarted right now. Talk a little Grendel, talk a little Batman, talk a little Dracula. That's next week. I got to go, but at some point, I'm going to catch up on what's going on in the world of Marvel Comics and mainstream comics. We will be
Yeah,
back
yeah.
for that. There was some big. I mean, I don't know how invested you are, Arpad, in any of this, but Ultimate Wolverine was
That's
announced
Chris
today.
Condon, right?
What's that?
Chris Condon, right?
Chris Condon of that
Yeah.
Texas Blood, which is a great. So that's what was the most exciting part to me. And the most exciting thing about this Ultimate line is you got Chris Condon, Alessandro Capuzio, who's been doing some nice work on Moon Knight. It's a
Mm,
good creative team. It's just like yes, like
yeah.
good creative team. Chris Condon hasn't been doing mainstream big two stuff. You know, it's not pulling back at like, what was big in 2004. It's like it's of the moment. It's
Mhm.
somebody who's doing cool stuff right now.
Yeah.
Let him do your Wolverine. I want to see it. I want to read it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's exciting to see the people that they're tapping right now for that
Yeah.
kind of just across the board. Love Declan's work. So seeing him as the writer artist for Mystique, that's
Yeah.
cool. I mean, the Ultimates right now is giant because you've got someone bringing their approach to telling a story and stuff like that. I just think that like yeah, that has been for a long time. Exciting creators being put on books is what gets my attention, and
Yes. And it
so
feels like there's a hunger and an energy there
yeah,
in the Ultimate line, and I hope to see that continue to grow because it's resonating, I think, clearly with audiences, and it's just
yeah.
like, let's support this stuff
I
because,
think that we've all been used to people revisiting stuff that has happened and putting a new spin on it.
mhm,
People who like loved a character for their whole careers getting a chance to do it, and the ultimate line to me feels like people have had ideas that they want to try out in comics,
mm,
and it's just it's definitely like tickling a different part of the brain.
yeah, yeah. Do you have any absolute Batman thoughts?
I like the like chunky art and stuff like that. That's not like my DC reading. I'm reading like Zatanna and I'm still reading the On the Lake books and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
um, so yeah, I don't know. I got no real take on that one way or another. It looks solid. Like it looks like the people who would be down for it are going to be like super satisfied
oh, yeah,
by it. Um, it's interesting, but like I truly don't know much in the way of like details or anything like that. All my stuff is like the people who contributed to it and like surface takes on seeing the art and stuff like that. I
yeah,
can
yeah.
talk your ear off about um, weird mail order stuff like Makinaphobe, but but when it comes to like to a lot of superhero stuff, my pocket is gonna like dry up real quick for contemporary stuff.
Hmm.
I'm always trying to read a couple things. I work as a manager in a store that does comics and music and other stuff and stuff like that, and so I want to have stuff that I can talk to people about and stuff like that. And for years and years and years, I don't know if anyone cares to hear about my reading preferences or anything like that. I was a Marvel person for years, but recently, since Black Label has kicked off, I've really found one or two DC books a year that are sort of my books that I'm reading. But it's
Yeah.
not like not part of the All In, not part of Absolute Power, not any of these the new lines of the original characters or stuff like that. Again, I'm following the creators I'm interested in. So
Yeah.
Noriko Tamaki doing Zatanna is like I don't have any stake in the Zatanna game, but I really thought that the layouts for roaming were amazing. The like flow of the art across the pages were really, really striking in that book. And so I wanted to see if she could bring that to action in like a superhero title.
Mm.
And in a lot of cases, she really does. It's what Javier Rodriguez,
Yeah.
the art
Yeah.
on that maybe.
Yeah. Great.
A really great pairing of those two together. So that's been fun, but that's me through and through. I don't have good Batman takes in this case,
No problem.
but the weird book about the like B-list character, I can go way over time on that and stuff like that. So
No, no, that's what I brought you here for. So that's
awesome.
excellent. All right. Arpad, this has been a blast. Everybody, we'll be back next week. Same time, same place, same channel. Like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. And we will be back. Thanks for joining. Enjoy the comics.
Mm.